Everyone listening today, I have Bear Handlon on the line. We are doing a virtual interview, which is very rare for me, but he's such a special guest. I made the exception. Bear played football at Yale, was a Navy SEAL, has a booming business called Born Primitive, is doing amazing things in giving back and philanthropy, which we'll get into today. So Bear, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Okay, so talk to me. Were you always an athlete?
Yeah, sports was pretty much in my upbringing from the very beginning. Played, was always going to practices. I dominated the schedule. And I was lucky enough that it evolved to a place where I could play in college. Didn't think it was, in the early days, but it paved the road for some cool opportunities.
And did you always play football or did you play other sports too? And eventually, as you got better at football, let those other sports go?
Yeah, I played football in baseball through high school, and I played basketball for part of high school, but then kind of focused in on football and baseball. But yeah, those three were from when I was tiny. Do other stuff like I did swimming for a little bit and wrestling, and you're a little kid, so you try it all. But eventually, that's what I honed in on.
When you went to college, were you looking at for academics or were you looking at for athletics?
Honestly, I thought it was a good combination of the two. That the Ivy Leagues, it's still Division I football. So it's still high level, but obviously, the academic component of that is pretty significant. When I started getting looks at from the Ivy League schools, I thought, hey, and I actually wanted to join the military at a high school, but once that started developing, my parents kind of convinced me, hey, why don't you go get a degree? These Ivy League schools are pretty good. You get a degree from there, maybe punch your ticket for other opportunities later in your life. And then if you graduate and still want to do it, you can go, the military will always be there. So I think that was some good advice from my parents. And the fact that I got to keep playing football, I was like, all right, well, I can keep rocking that. If football wasn't there, I probably wouldn't have done it. But that was enough to keep me entertained of like, well, I could keep my playing career going for 4 more years.
Yeah, no, right? I mean, I played college ball and it's fun and then it's done. And you're so glad you took those extra years to do it because you don't get it back. When you play organized sports, it is way too much work to organize it to get everybody to play. Was it hard academically at Yale?
Yeah, it was. Like anything, you apply yourself, you can get the job done. Definitely pretty intimidating. And I went to a public school in Indiana. My school was free. A lot of my classmates were coming from these super superior private schools where they're in a feeder system since they're in kindergarten. And by the time they're a senior, their parents paying $80,000 a year for high school. I mean, totally nuts, particularly in the Northeast. That was a whole world I knew nothing about. And 2 of my roommates came from that world. And I was like, that's insane. 70% of their senior class gets into an Ivy League school. So it's like a system where they're bred for this.
Yeah.
And I was just some Midwestern kid who went to a public school that liked football and, for whatever reason was willing to apply himself in the classroom. So it was a little intimidating at first, but then I realized like, if you just, put in the work, you're totally fine. And what I also kind of realized is I was actually better prepared than a lot of the super smart kids because they were used to just not having to put in any effort because they were so brilliant. And then this was like one where, hey, your brilliance will only take you so far. Like you're in the big leagues now. And if you don't apply yourself, those people would fall behind, where hard work was all I knew. So like I got in the mix right away. And before you know it, you're actually getting better grades than some of these kids that got perfect SAT scores. So that was kind of a cool lesson learned. And then by your freshman year, you're like, all right, I can hang here. I'm totally good. I'm not out of my element. So that part worked out just fine, but definitely a lot of work, particularly when you're a full-time athlete. As you know, you're putting 40, 50, 60 hours a week into practice and workouts and travel when you have away games. And then everyone else has like the whole afternoon and evening free to do whatever the hell they want. And I think that was a lot, a skill that I acquired that is still very useful for me today to be able to compartmentalize the different tasks you have and focus in on them. When you're at football practice, you don't need to worry about the final you have tomorrow. And when you get home and you have 3 hours of reading, you can't be thinking about that tackle you missed at practice or whatever, you know what I mean? And you got to just lock in a box and focus. So I'm glad I had to experience that.
Yeah, no. And for me, it was awesome because if I was winning in one area and not another, at least I had wins somewhere. So sometimes it was academics, sometimes it was sports, but it was very rare that both were going bad at the same time. So it always taught me to keep my hands in a few different things so that I get satisfaction from more than just one area. And that's been helpful. Yes. And I do believe we rise to the occasion. If you go to the school and this is what it's expected to you, and if you're a competitive human, that you're going to compete and get to where you need to be.
Absolutely. And yeah, I actually found I got better grades in season, my fall semester than spring, 20 more hours in a week that you didn't have in the fall, and your grades are slightly worse. So it's an interesting, kind of experience. But yeah, when there's only so many hours in the day, it forces you to dial in on anything.
For sure. Okay, so what did you graduate with, and how early did you go into the military after graduation?
I had a degree in political science.
Okay.
They're a liberal arts school. I probably would have done like a business or a marketing major if they had it. They just didn't. But that was a good experience. You do a lot of writing. So like I think learning how to write is a critical skill as an adult, professional setting, to be able to articulate your thoughts, and it's useful on a daily basis. So I did that.
How did you pick the Navy SEALs of all the different, like you could do the Green Berets? There's a lot of choices.
I think that route was planted after 9/11. I was in middle school and that happened. And on that day, I still vividly remember going home from school. We got delivered a newspaper, like an afternoon edition newspaper from the local newspaper. And I cut it out, and I still have the original clip. It's gone with me everywhere I've went since then. And I knew that day that eventually I needed to join the service. And for a young 14-year-old at the time, my reaction in that moment, in that version of myself's head, was eventually I want revenge, because I'm only 14 now, but like when I'm a grown ass man, I want to be in this fight because this just happened. And I would say that pretty much was the same reason as an adult. It became a bit more nuanced, but it was still the same overall intent of, hey, I want to serve my country. And as long as there are bad men out there, innocent civilians, then I want to join a group of people who will actively seek them out and eliminate them. And that seemed very appealing to me. And just the honor of being able to wear the flag on your uniform and serve your country was significant. So that's when the seed was planted. As I mentioned, I wanted to do it out of high school. My parents talked me out of it. And then when I graduated, I had a football injury. So I had to get surgery on my shoulder right before I graduated. And so that took some time to heal. So I figured, let me go get a real job while I heal and get back in shape. So I took a job with Red Bull, worked for them for 4 years, did brand marketing, which was awesome, great exposure, an incredible brand to work for. That was kind of how I learned about brand, because I got to kind of learn from, honestly,
The best.
maybe one of the best entities that have written that playbook.
Where they wrote their own category. They didn't just say, hey, I'm going to like try to move this category. I'm going to create my own category. Category of one.
Red Bull created the energy drink category, and everyone else that has followed has benefited from them, blazing that trail for them. But that was a great experience. Long story short, I was going to go. I was getting a lot of family pressure. I was married, and mostly her parents and my mom did not want me to go, and they put a lot of pressure on me. I ultimately kind of shelved the dream for a little bit, but then realized, I'm staring at the ceiling every night thinking about it. It's occupying my thoughts all day long when I'm at work. I came to the realization that if I don't do this, I'm going to regret it the rest of my life. So I kind of secretly started training again for it, and got accepted. And then I remember I told my mom that I was going on Mother's Day, and she came down to visit, and I gave her my acceptance letter, and then I was leaving in like 2 weeks. So I figured I don't need to, expose her to any. I think I knew like 2 months prior, but I was like, let me just wait until the last second. So that was kind of ironic. She was not that stoked about that announcement on Mother's Day.
How old were you when you joined them? Because isn't there a certain age you need to join by to be able to get to that level?
Yeah, I was 25. And I think anything above 30, you actually have to get a waiver for. In which they'll grant. Like if someone's 33 and they like are in really good shape, they probably can get a waiver. But yeah, I think 30 is the technical cutoff. So I was well within that. So yeah, that was the start of that journey. I went out to officer candidate school, got my commission, and then went out to SEAL training and started that whole journey.
I think I remember listening to one of your other interviews, which I thought was interesting, about how you got rid of all your exits, right? So when you take on these hard things, and we know they're going to be really hard, just like when I'm climbing a mountain. So if I'm climbing Everest, or if I'm climbing K2, or I'm climbing these crazy mountains, you don't have an exit strategy. Like your only way is to get up. And sometimes your only way is to get up because you go down a different route than what you came up. And that no exits is a game changer in what you can achieve.
Yeah, it's almost like a psychology hack. It makes you superhuman. It's not complex. It's a very simple thought process. To use an extreme example, like think of the guys like in Vietnam that were like prisoners of war for like 2 or 3 years, enduring horrific conditions. Those men that were prisoners of war weren't necessarily tough or hard men, right? They could have been very ordinary men that just happened to get captured, right? But because there was no other alternative, they endured it because that's it, right? Now, I suppose you could say they could have maybe found a way to kill themselves, but other than that, there's no alternative. They endured it and they made it, right? Whereas if that had been a, hey, if you want to quit, you can type thing, 100% of them would have quit, right? So it's an extreme analogy, but I think it's in any endeavor in life, if you can try to apply that kind of burn the ships mentality, there are no off ramps. It doesn't mean it'll be any less uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
But it will clear your mind as to, hey, in this moment, this is what we're doing. And that's all it comes down to. It's that simple. In my mind, this is just what we're doing in this moment of time, in this specific instance. And it's that goddamn simple. And I know you can relate to that with your endeavors. And if you can just put it into that framework, and it takes practice, I think. It's not something you can just go, okay, I have no off ramps. You almost have to rehearse it in your head. So when you become compromised, and you start getting those little voices in your head, you've already gotten ahead of it and you can silence those voices immediately.
Right. I think that's because if you give them runway, they will take over. And so you just have to learn like, oh, that's a thought that doesn't serve me. Shut it down before I feed it. And now it has an entire vision that sounds so much better than what I'm going through. I think winning is a habit. I think grit's a habit. I think all of this is these things that we continuously do. And the more you do them, the easier they become because your body knows. I'm not even going to try Jenn. Jenn's going to say no because she's going to shut it down.
Yeah. And I think with any hard endeavor, your reasons matter too. And that can get you maybe to the front door of training and maybe motivates you to do the pool workouts and the running because you think you're going to become this badass. But as soon as it gets hard and it's 2:00 in the morning and you're in the Pacific Ocean and you're hypothermic and you've gotten, an hour of sleep in the last 3 days and you're getting absolutely crushed, the real reasons come out. And those kind of surface level reasons won't be enough to get you through that. Because you'll immediately go, you know what? I thought that would be cool, but it's not that cool.
It's not.
I want to go get a warm shower and I want to get on with my life. So I think that, with any endeavor, your actual reasons for doing it need. So if someone wanted to climb Everest and they were like, their actual reason is because they want to achieve a status that they can then project to other people. And I think that's really, what it comes down to. And I think people need to be very realistic and honest with themselves before any of those types of things of, okay, why am I really doing this? And how deep does it go? And if it's a real reason it goes deep, okay, that'll hold up in adversity. But if it's, hey, because I want to do this so my girlfriend's impressed or because I want people to think I'm a cool guy at a party, no, you're not going to make it. Don't even try.
Honestly think like being a mom is like gives you the most superpower out of anything because you're like, my kids are watching. And I'm demonstrating what you do when hard things happen. There's no way I'm demonstrating that we back down. Like, no, this is where we're called to the table and we show what we're made of. And it's funny so much so where I took my kids on break where their friends went to Mexico and we went to go climb Kilimanjaro. And they're like, yeah, you don't have a mom like ours. Your mom lets you sit at the beach and drink beers with your friends. Our mom makes us climb mountains and learn what we're made of. And I'm like, hey, you picked me. I'm sorry. That's what you got.
That's awesome. And that is an absolutely great reason to be motivated.
Because you had the career with Red Bull. You got into CrossFit, which was the big craze at the time and still is a big craze. There was something with the pelvic bone. Bring me to this story.
Yeah. So right before I joined the Navy, I've always been kind of a serial entrepreneur and always just kind of had that hustle in me of, what can I do? And I was CrossFitting. I ended up competing at the CrossFit Games. And so we were doing a lot of high volume training. And a lot of that was Olympic weightlifting. For those that don't do that, there's a movement in Olympic weightlifting called snatch, where you have a wide grip and you lift the barbell up over your head. And in the transition portion of the lift, where you really generate a lot of the power, some people can really drill their pubic bone with the barbell. So long story short, I took an old football girdle, I cut out the quad pad and went over to my neighbor's house, who's a seamstress, and she sewed that pad into the groin area of another pair of compression shorts. And that was the prototype. And I thought, I'm just going to wear these like every time I do that lift. And it's one of one. And it's the end of the idea. But I started wearing it to the gym and the guys were chiming in. Like first it was kind of funny, but then they were like, hey, you should actually market that. So I did some research on weightlifting forums and realizing, okay, I'm not the only idiot that has this problem. There was actually real like Olympians that had broken their pubic bone in competition. I said, okay, well, if the Olympians are hurting themselves, it's not just me with bad form. So I self-educated on supply chain and product development. I knew nothing about that, of course. So I was just reading books and So totally self-taught, got some prototypes made, and then eventually put in my first order of like 200 units, which to me sounded insane. And that's how technically Born Primitive was born. And then I shipped off to officer candidate school, and my Mallory, who's our co-founder, and we used to be married. She was a dental hygienist at the time. She had to kind of take over while I was at officer candidate school, even though I did have my phone and I would have 1 bar of service at night, like, firing out emails and stuff when I should have been shining my boots. That was the early days of Born Primitive. And then when we went out to San Diego for SEAL training, the hustle just continued there, and we expanded into different products. Yeah, in the early years, that's all it was. There was nothing fancy about it. It was just getting in front of people, and every waking minute we were doing Born Primitive when I wasn't doing my military stuff.
And I think that's an important lesson to share for all entrepreneurs that are listening or that want to become an entrepreneur. It is not sexy in the beginning.
No.
It is so grinding and grueling, and there's no promise. So you're just, am I getting somewhere with this? Is this working? Is it not working? People made fun of me at first. And then they're like, hey, this is a good idea. And then you order 200 items, which, believe it or not, is a lot to sell. What was your next product?
We started screen printing t-shirts and hoodies, so nothing crazy, kind of your tri-blend shirt that anyone can do at the print shop down the street. And we kind of came up with our first logo, which was like literally a caveman snatching a tree with a loincloth between his legs and an American flag bandana. Shows how sophisticated I was back then.
Yeah.
Probably still, it still checks out. So we would, again, go to CrossFit events, and we'd have the snatch shorts out, and then a couple, t-shirts, and, we started just slinging t-shirts and hoodies. Again, nothing crazy. And then eventually Mal got us into kind of the performance cut and sew stuff. So she developed the first sports bra that we sold, like probably 2 years in. And that was the light bulb moment for us. She basically took a very popular bra that a lot of girls were familiar with and changed the fit so it could actually fit girls that like to work out. Because the fit was like for yoga girls that maybe like don't really want to lift. And so they don't really have any traps. And Mal was like, well, this doesn't fit CrossFitters. So let me make it for girls that have a little bit more muscle. And the response when she did that was insane, because girls were like, oh my God, like finally there's one that fits right for us. That got us down that road of performance cut and sew stuff that we were actually developing, and not just ordering like tri-blend t-shirts and getting them printed at a local screen printing shop. Before you know it, I think we have like 1,600 products now. It's gotten totally insane. So
in the original days, it was going to the competitions, and it was, with the card table, putting up the little thing. How much of it is now driven by online sales?
We are 90+% online, and we are expanding. And now just recently, we've kind of opened our doors to, pursue bigger retail accounts. But for the longest time, we wanted to be hyper focused on just direct to consumer through our site. So a lot of people will try to get into big retail right away and then try to like establish their direct to consumer side. We did it in reverse, and there's a lot of advantages that have come with that. Now it's harder. There's a lot of challenges, of course, too. We're kind of like the pretty girl that no one's danced with yet.
A unique part of your story is that you self-funded, right? Where a lot of people will take capital injections earlier on, but you guys were able to bootstrap this and keep the revenue going to make it grow like it has.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm really glad we did that. While I respect the game, I think there's something to be said for bootstrapping your own operation. It requires you to be hyper efficient. It also makes you a wild underdog in the story. Now, if you get a $20 million check, that gives you an advantage in a marketing front where you can, get the influencers and have some ads going, and you could be, pretty quickly known. But if you're bootstrapped like we were, how the heck are you going to create any traction in such a crowded field, right? I mean, it's next to impossible. I've heard offhand comments before, like, must be nice. What I would want to say is, oh, really? Must be nice? Well, let me break this down for you. Mm-hmm. Imagine an endeavor that for the first 6 years, every waking hour of your free time with your spouse, you guys were dedicated to something that you had not made a penny on. It was stressful. You had to learn every process from scratch. And there was a less than 8% chance that it was going to amount to anything in your life. So when they say must be nice, it's like, you have no clue. 6 years, we didn't make a penny. Mal was full time. She gave up her dental hygiene career. And, we were living on one salary. I'm active duty. And there's no guarantee of success, right? So I think that's really important for any entrepreneur you have to know what you're getting yourself into. And you have to be realistic with like your own personality. And then when you talk about the sacrifices you make in your own life, It's insane. I mean, I remember we would go on vacation to Hawaii once a year, and I quote vacation. We would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning on the vacation because we would be aligned with business hours on the East Coast, and we would work 4 to noon. And then at noon, when East Coast, because I think it's 5 hours, they're closing out shop. We'd be like, okay, let's start our day. We're in freaking Hawaii, right? When we should have been like, hey, we're shutting it down for the week. That's what it took. So we're going to bed at 7:30 on vacation because we're getting up at 3:45. Again, I just get a little fired up because the whole must be nice thing. It's like, no, that was paid for. Has it given me some abundance and opportunities financially in my life now, 11 years later? Absolutely. And am I fully leveraging that to provide a good future for my daughter so she'll never have to worry about money ever again? Yes, I am. But I will not apologize to anyone for creating that surplus.
It does become a little bit of an addiction, which I like your vacation. It takes a while for people like us to even know what to do with ourselves in the space where we have, because we're so used to doing. That's been my journey now. How do I balance this? Because, when you have kids, your daughter, it makes a difference. You're like, okay, I need to be present for them so that I don't miss these moments because they evaporate.
Another part of it is that mentality of what it takes absolutely can produce collateral damage in your life. Mallory and I are not married anymore. We still run the business together, and honestly, it's a great partnership. She's an absolute stud. She's very talented. We kind of complement each other very well. The things I stink at, she's great, and vice versa. And it's cordial, but hey, when you're with your spouse trying to run a business for 6 straight years and every waking minute you're doing, emails next to each other on the couch when you could be relaxing and, actually being husband and wife, eventually that the check engine light's going to go on, and that there's going to be consequences of not, balancing things out a little bit more. So again, it's just one of those things. It's a trade-off. And I saw that a lot with my career in the SEAL teams with guys, because the job was so demanding. The divorce rate was crazy high. They're not with their kids a lot because we're all over the country training or going on deployments. So, with anything, there's trade-offs, and just being realistic with the collateral damage that it might produce. It doesn't mean you're not going to maybe still do it, but at least being self-aware. And for me, I was naive enough to not even know that was a thing. So I went all in, hard charging. Maybe in a way, I'm glad I didn't think that far ahead, because I probably would have maybe been more timid. But at the same time, it's hard to kind of put a price on what some of those trade-offs are, because they're not measurable.
Now, when you signed up for the SEALs, were you in for 8 years? Like, that was your program? Did the business go so well?
Yeah, I could have kept going. I was it was getting harder and harder to manage both. I was getting more senior in the military. And, obviously, the job as a SEAL is pretty serious, pretty high stress, pretty dangerous. So I would go from like that job, and then I'd get back to like my hotel at night, and I'd have 50 work emails and a million emails from Mallory saying, hey, this supplier, this happened, or this. And, so I'd have to, again, compartmentalize what I just did. Okay, now I'm back at my hotel. It's 11 o'clock at night, and I have 2 to 3 hours of emails to do. And I have to be down in the lobby again at 5:30 tomorrow morning for another full day of training until, 10 p.m. Once I had a daughter on the way that, okay, there's no way if I add now a human to this that I'm in charge of. I have enough of a work ethic that I can be good at both, but maybe not great. But now if you add the being a father, it would be a C average in all three. And that just wasn't acceptable to me. I had obviously, by that time I had a bunch of employees. So it's like, all right, well, I can't just cut the business away because I have now an obligation to these people. Some of them have moved across the country with their families to work for us. So I can't just abandon ship there. Obviously, I'm not going to abandon being a father, and did what I wanted to do. I got to serve my country and be around a lot of great men. But hey, I need to be a man and get remove one of the items from my plate. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but it was kind of the adult thing to do, I think.
Where do you see Born Primitive going in the future?
I see us really disrupting the apparel industry in a significant manner. We have a lot of irons in the fire right now, a lot of things in the works. Specifically, we recently launched footwear that has gone better than I could have ever imagined.
Why do you think that's gone so well? Because you already had the buyers, or because the shoe is so much superior compared to what's out there?
I think product is always at the core of everything. Some of the earlier Metcons were fantastic. I think like the Metcon 4 or 5 was like my favorite shoe ever until we launched this one. And then the Nano, every other year, the shoe would be great and it'd be terrible. It'd be great, it'd be terrible. So I was the consumer because we didn't have footwear. So like, of course I was still wearing other brands. And I was getting so fed up with the inconsistency. And then the Metcon specifically were getting way too bulky. They were bricks on your feet. By the Metcon 8, it was literally like you're wearing bricks. So I was just frustrated as a consumer of there has to be a better option. And finally I was like, all right, well, hey man, you're in apparel. Let's do something about it. So I kind of took my years of being, in human performance and put together with the shoe engineers, the components of a training shoe that I thought were really important. And they were able to kind of translate that into a real product. And then we went through all the prototypes and landed on something that when the end consumer, I mean, the reviews on it are so insane. We don't even really have to market as much because every time we restock it, we sell out immediately. And then, we're going to expand that into a running shoe. There's going to be a barefoot trainer. We have an assault boot for our military and law enforcement people. And it's kind of like a hiking boot too. So for outdoor use. And then we have like a lifestyle sneaker coming out. That'll be kind of cool. Kind of like a skateboarding shoe, but just kind of like a Vans, Converse, kind of hybrid. It'll be pretty cool. And then we recently launched our outdoor and tactical lines, mainly kind of backcountry hunting, and then tactical specifically for military and law enforcement. And those have absolutely exploded. Specifically for those two, we were getting issued all of these things when I was in the SEAL teams. And one, I wasn't happy with the gear we were getting. And two, I wasn't happy with the ethos of the companies that were supplying us the products. But when you are speaking out of one side of your mouth and then, getting hundreds of millions of dollars selling to the government, I had issues with that. And in some instances, they were selling it through an intermediary and like rebranding it so they could say like they had an arm's distance length, but we knew it was Patagonia we were getting. So I'm sitting there saying, okay, we're supposed to be the tip of the spear. And I just blew out the crotch of my pants from a company that just got $100 million contract that doesn't even actually like us to support the warfighter's effort. Like, what are we doing here? And that planted the seed of, hey, eventually I'm going to do something about this. And that was, why eventually I wanted to create the outdoor and tactical line. Nor are you getting out in the backcountry for 11 days and going on an elk hunt, right?
And tell me where I want that zipper. Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, exactly. So that gave us an advantage from a product development side and also an authenticity that, hey, these aren't some dorks in a boardroom. These are actual guys that are us. And that's been really exciting. Proof is in the pudding. I mean, people can sense the authenticity, but then when they get the products, they say, wow, whoever designed this really thought through every little detail and probably a lot in your world with climbing. I'm sure there's very nuanced features that unless you live in your world, you wouldn't even notice it. Hey, the zipper's here instead of here. It's where your rucksack, clips together. Okay, so you can't access it. So it's an inch higher, so you can actually get your little things like that unless you're doing it all the time, you would never even notice the difference. So that's kind of new. And then we're building a giant facility down the road, which has been really exciting. It'll be about a 55,000 square foot facility. That'll be our headquarters. That's our next fall. That should be done. So we're working through all the plans right now with the architects and the designers and all the interior design. It's really exciting. So a lot in the works. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see what these next few years bring.
You've been triggered by something that gets you mad that it's not a certain way. And you're like, I'm going to take care of that someday. But you're not rushing to the scene with that anxious energy of it needs to be fixed now. You're like, I'm going to take care of this someday. And you're allowing life to happen and allowing it to show up when it makes sense to show up. You had the idea to join the military. Hey, I'm going to go to college first because this showed up. I'm going to work a little bit. Now I'm going to join the military. Then you have this, I want this shoe because these shoes had problems, blah, 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 blah. And you gave yourself time and runway to fix this thing. I can't wait to see what happens with government contracts in the future. And you figure out how to bring all that onshore, build the environment that allows everybody to excel and succeed, which is amazing. But probably one thing we haven't been able to hit on yet that I think is so important for businesses today to have long-term success is how you guys give back and how you put your money where your money comes in from.
In the very beginning of building Born Primitive, and this is partly from my exposure to Red Bull, I got together with Mal and I said, hey, we need to establish our identity, who we're going to be from day one. And those will be the pillars of our existence. That's how we are going to become noticed in a very crowded and busy world. And again, I learned that from Red Bull. I would have never probably been smart enough to come up with that on my own. Growing up, I'm a Midwest kid. I was patriotic. I love my country. I love what it stands for. I always supported the veteran and first responder communities. And I was taught, by my parents that you only get what you earn. You got to work your butt off. The world owes you nothing. You want to be a good student? Hit the books, stay up late, take the AP classes. No one's going to hand you any of that. So that was my identity. And I saw it validated through my own efforts with things that I was accomplishing because I had, adopted that mindset. So it meant a lot to me. So that became the identity of Born Primitive. And I said, we also have to leverage our platform as we grow it to give back. That was kind of, planted early. And I said, we really, what's the point of doing this if we're not going to leverage it to try to do some good for something that we're passionate about? So, obviously in the early days, our give back to charity was not financially as significant.
Right.
But every year as we got, better financially and more successful, we were able to raise the bar on that. And I think, so to date, we've donated close to 2 million to charity. With free apparel, it's like probably another million at least. We would give stuff to different organizations. During COVID was, I think, the most unique one initially. So we were still able to sell our product online, but the gyms, when your business is literally people are not allowed to show up, they were not, some of them were worried about how they're going to make their next month rent. So we partnered up with a drink company that was in our space and basically said, hey, for the next 10 days, let's pledge half of all of our profits back to gyms that are struggling right now. And their customers can shop our site and then use their gym's promo code. And then the gym will get like basically a massive kickback. I mean, we're not just talking like a 10% cut. I mean, it was half the profits. Yeah. And we did that and it went viral. And we ended up donating over $200,000 to gyms. And then the following month, we did this big gift card incentive to try to get people to keep their memberships. So we did another like $2 million in gift cards for that to kind of keep, because we thought it was going to be quick. And then when a month went by and we're like still doing it, all right, what else can we do? So that was kind of our biggest kind of initial charitable effort. And, obviously the response from the actual gym owners was nuts. They were like, this is crazy. Thank you so much. The government isn't helping us. And the fact that like companies are going out of their way, like we're blown away. So it was cool. And then I think, but our biggest thing is with Veterans Day every year. For the last 3 years, we've donated 100% of profits back to veteran charities. So typically for like 2 or 3 days, we'll say, all right, here's the sprint. If you want to come shop for a cause, we're going to donate it all to charity. So the last 3 years, we donated 75 grand and the last 2 years was 100 grand both times. We're always looking at opportunities like, hey, if we're going to do this badass shoe launch for the 80th, I was kind of like, all right, well, I don't want to profit from a historical example that was because of men that 80 years ago did the most badass thing ever. There needs to be a give back component to this. And it aligns so well with the Best Defense Foundation, who we've supported in the past. That's kind of what we've done recently. But, every year the challenge, okay, how do we raise the bar? Because we now have a responsibility. We have a platform. It can't just be, a box that we're trying to check. It needs to, it's really, comes down to the core of our DNA. And then the last thing I'll kind of tease, this year we're gonna raise the bar from November 8th to the 11th. So just in a few days, we are going to be paying off of $5 million of veteran medical bill debt. So I've already paid off $2.5 million. People are going to be getting letters in the mail that are veterans that have incurred significant medical bill debt that they haven't been able to pay. That debt will be forgiven from Friday through Monday, which Monday is the 11th. That's Veterans Day. We're going to pledge all sales to help us reach the $5 million debt payoff goal. And I think we're going to get there. We create a lot of buzz when we do this. So if anyone's looking to shop for a really cool cause and wants to get their Christmas shopping out of the way, bornprimitive.com, again, from Friday through Monday, we're pledging all of it to that cause. We've already bought $2.5 million of these guys' debt, and there's no catch. They literally get a letter in the mail saying your debt has been forgiven for this thing. And some of them are significant amounts of money. And it's just a really neat thing we're doing. And we saw this as something, these people sign up, they serve their country, and then they get out. This is the case of the guy whose 5-year-old daughter got a rare illness and is now $100,000 in medical bill debts that he will never be able to pay at his salary, and he'll be in debt forever. His credit score is getting crushed. He can't get approved for a loan now. The second, third, fourth order effects of what that creates, particularly when we talk about veteran suicide, financial distress is one of the major components that goes into that whole, kind of dilemma that we have in our community. So this was a more unique one. I mean, I'm really excited about it. I cannot wait to start seeing some of the reactions of the people when they get their letters. Oh. They're honestly probably going to think it's fake. And I'm actually going to be calling some of these individuals myself. We're going to try to connect with a lot of these people and actually thank them for their service and let them know that, hey, you're not alone. And while this is, in the grand scheme of things, more of a symbolic gesture, when we recognize there's still tens of thousands of people that we're not helping, I'm hoping that it might be a catalyst for other companies to use and leverage their platform to do something similar. And it, of course, doesn't need to be just veterans. Like, to me, obviously, that's close to my heart. And I thought on Veterans Day, this was only appropriate. But there's so many people that could honestly use, a little hand. And if we all come together and carry the load a little bit for others that when they really need it, that's a really good thing. So
I'm not tearing up at all over here. Are you kidding me? This is why when you shop with companies or you work with individuals, like, do your due diligence and just go that step further and see the impact that they're giving back and how they're affecting people that they can. That's why Born Primitive is so magical, not just because of the problems that you solve for all of us that are healthy, doing these awesome exercises and CrossFit and tactical training now and the shoes and all the pieces. It's what you make possible for everyone else. And when we help a person in need, that loyalty, that energy shift, that who that person now gets to become, it's a ripple effect that we can't even begin to measure.
In a way, acts like this are kind of self-serving because of what we get out of it, right? Like I get to weaponize the company that I built to now pay off $5 million of debt for veterans all over the country. That is a source of probably major stress and turmoil in their life. And who knows? I mean, this is an extreme conclusion, but maybe this will prevent one suicide. Yeah. You know what I mean? Maybe one guy's, he's 180K in the hole and there's no way out of this, right? And hey, why the heck am I even here? Right? I can't get approved for a loan, this, that, maybe. So
changes the narrative. Yeah.
That's how I look at it. And it's like, man, when you really think, not to go down a rabbit hole, but with our government, with how much money we have, if allocated in a maybe a different way, the impact that could be created in such, you know what I mean? I just, if there's a way to spend our money, I wonder, are there better ways to spend it? And maybe things that are more in line with something like this, where it's like, wow, everyone can high five. No one will dispute that that's a great way to, maybe that's another story.
We planted the seed. We planted the curiosity seed in all of you listening today. Yeah. What can you be doing with your dollars that satisfy more than just your needs, but help others? And that's what Born Primitive makes available. Make sure you go on their website and buy November 8th through November 11. We will push it on our socials. We're pushing it out on this episode. This is where you get a chance to give back and take care of those on your list. And if anybody wants to know what I want, their sports bras are amazing. Okay. So just so you know.
That's a good pick. We make pretty good sports bras, so you can't go wrong there.
No, not at all. Well, thank you so much for being on today, Bear. We really appreciate what you're doing with your life, what you're making available for all of us, and what you're doing for others.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the platform.